Hello and welcome back to the Serverless Hub. I hope you're well and staying safe. I'm your host Nisal Wickremage. You can follow me on LinkedIn and GitHub. In this video, we will be discussing about doing blue-green deployments for Azure Functions using deployment slots. Before we get into deployment slots, let's understand what blue-green deployment is. Once your application goes to productions, users will be using the application around the clock from all over the world. Few minutes of downtime can be very costly for the reputation and the business. But typically when you need to deploy changes to the application, it always comes with a downtime unless you adopt blue-green deployment strategy. Blue-green strategy involves keeping two live instances. One instance will receive all the production traffic. This will be the green instance. Other instance will be idle and this will be the blue instance. Whenever new code needs to be deployed, it will be deployed into the idle blue instance. Once new code is in the blue instance, we can switch the production traffic to the blue instance. This switch is usually instantaneous if you are using a load balancer to route the traffic. We can do this switch using DNS records as well, but that will take time to take effect depending on the time to live for DNS caches. Now that production traffic is switched to blue instance, it becomes green. And the green instance becomes blue. We can do the next deployment into the new blue instance. Blue-green deployments also help us to simplify rollbacks. If the new code starts failing handling the production traffic, we can easily switch back to the previous version by simply switching the instances. Let's jump into Azure portal and see how we can use deployment slots to do blue-green deployments. Let's go to the deployment slots. Click on Add Slot. Type in the name you prefer. I'm going with staging. Click on Add. It will take a while to create the slot. Initially, the new instance will be empty. Let's deploy the code from video series I mentioned above. I will use VS Code with Azure Functions extensions to deploy the code. We can use Azure pipelines as well. I have already done a video on how to create a deployment pipeline for Azure Functions. I will link the video in the description below. I will point out the changes required for that pipeline to be able to deploy to a slot. First, let's add a log statement to the code which will help us differentiate the different code versions in the slots. Let's go to the Azure Functions extension. Open up the Azure subscription. Then open the function app we are using. Then expand the slots. The slot we created will be listed. Let's right click on the slot and select Deploy to Slot. Next, I will go to the logs of the function app. For this, you need to enable Application Insight. I have done a video enabling Application Insights and monitoring for Azure Functions. I will leave the link in the description. Let's query for the latest logs from the getToDoItems function. Now let's go to the function app deployment slots. Then click on swap. Give it a minute to do the swap. During the swap, traffic is handled gracefully. No request will be rejected during the swap. Swap is now completed. Let's ping the API again and see the logs. We can see the new log statement that we added. If you want to deploy to a deployment slot from an Azure pipeline, you can do so by setting two properties, deploy to slot OASC and slot name. After we swap the slots and traffic starts to fail, you can do another swap and revert to the original state as well. I click on swap. Click swap again. Once the swap is completed, you can verify the behavior. Let's send a request. Let's watch for the logs. As you can see, logs for the new request doesn't include the silly error message. Another cool thing with deployment slots is it has its own URL. We can even test the new deployment before even swapping to production. Before we wrap up, I want to show you how configuration behaves for slot enabled function app. Both production slot and the other slots has its own set of configuration settings. To demonstrate how configuration settings behaves when swapping, let's open configuration settings page for both production slot and the staging slot. Production slot configuration is same as the function app configuration page. Let's add new setting to the production slot. Let's go to the deployment slots page and do a swap. Click on swap. Notice that in the swap pane, config changes are displayed. It is saying that new setting value will be changed from not set to A for the staging slot. That is because new setting was configured for the function app instance currently in production. When instance in staging is swapped to production, new setting config value is brought to the staging slot with the function app instance. If we check the configuration page in the function app itself, we will not see the new setting config value because it was moved across to the staging slot. If you want to add the config setting that needs to stick with the slot, for an example, a DB connection string, endpoints to a payment service, you mark it as a deployment slot setting when you add in the config setting. Now let's swap the instance to verify the idea. The new connection string value has stayed with the production slot. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, leave a comment or send us an email to theserverlesshub@gmail.com. If you like this video, please like and share and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next video. Stay safe.